Cominciamo. Benvenuti tutti quanti, abbiamo deciso di fare questa giornata, questo Merging Day, perché molti clienti o appassionati avevano chiesto, superato il Covid, di fare un incontro per mostrare e dimostrare le novità, soprattutto la Music Mission e le novità inerenti l'Anubis soprattutto. E quindi con l'occasione che Maurice è venuto a Roma, anche perché abbiamo delle installazioni per Umbria Jazz nei prossimi giorni dall'8-9 in poi, che Umbria Jazz anche si è dotata di sistemi merging per sia il networking che la parte di conversione, preamplificazione, interfaccia e streaming. Con l'occasione che è venuto a Roma abbiamo pensato di fare questo incontro e quindi una giornata, una full immersion che vuole essere sia introduttiva sia di approfondimento sulle macchine merging e sono contento che il pubblico è eterogeneo, per cui ci sono persone che già conosco che usano merging e persone nuove che non conosco e che magari hanno conosciuto merging in qualche altro modo, però è una buona occasione, un buon modo per approfondire seriamente e capire meglio le potenzialità sia delle macchine sia del networking che è connesso ai prodotti merging. Quindi grazie di essere qui Maurice, benvenuto e ti lascio la piazza per fare un'introduzione.
Buongiorno, I will switch to English straight away, sorry. My Italian is not good enough to do this in Italian, so if you have issues with it, I guess everybody speaks English, but if you have issues or if I speak too fast or whatever, either ask Igor to translate or just raise your hand if I start to go on to speak much faster than I should. As you received the program today is in basically 3 parts. The first part is a presentation about Anubis, this device, with a new mission. So what we call mission is basically the user interface, the application that we have. And there was, when it was launched 2 years ago, there was the Anubis monitoring mission. We're going to talk about this the second part. But we're going to first start with the Anubis music mission and explain what it is. So the hardware is the same. It's basically just an update on the firmware, and you can go from one to the other. For the people who don't know what merging is, what this box is doing, I'm gonna introduce it. And so the second part will be Anubis with monitoring, so that people today more and more have problematics basically because they have to deliver many different formats, going from stereo or even sometimes mono, but mainly stereo, to Dolby Atmos and beyond. So how do I manage all of this? How do I can listen to that and so on? So with those devices that we have here, we're going to onboard this. And the third one, we're going to talk about the Happy Mark II and all the infrastructure to it. So obviously, as Igor mentioned it, we are on an IP infrastructure, and people will say, well, I have USB, I have Thunderbolt, I'm very happy with that. But okay, obviously it works, but IP brings a lot more to it as well, to the possibilities. Good. That's for the overall journey we're going to make together. And explaining a little bit what we have here. Sorry, our projector is a little bit red, but that's how it is. We have here we have basically a network with 4 devices on it. We have a Happy, which is an AD-DA converter with different cards. We're going to come into detail to this. We have an Anubis that is here. I have one that is not connected, so I can pass it through if you want. But we have an Anubis here that is connected to the network, and we have 2 computers. We have a Mac computer and a PC computer. So to really show that basically all of that can be possible, and this is all connected to a switch. And this switch is basically, it has to be a switch that you can program, that you can manage. This is the right word. There are some certified switch from merging that you can use, but I'm not going to go into detail into that. But it's not just a simple switch from the shop. It has to have certain functionalities in there to be able to interconnect all of that. Good. Let's start with the music mission. And obviously, if you have questions, if you have remarks, do not hesitate, and I will try to answer as well as I can. So for those who don't know Anubis, Anubis is this little device, and to start with, it has two microphone and switchable line inputs. These are 137 dB dynamic range inputs, so you have a lot of space to do things. You then have in the front two other inputs, which are this time line and high impedance input for music instruments, for example, if you want to go onto the high impedance side. This is for the inputs. For the outputs, you have two line outputs and two other line outputs. So those aren't TLS, those are on XLRs, but the quality is the same. It's just physically, so that it's smaller.
Is it all balanced or?
Yeah, balanced, yes.
That two, and the other two?
Yeah, yes, it's a TLS, but three
okay.
people, so that you have the balance.
Stereo jack.
Exactly, stereo, if you prefer stereo jack. And then you have two headphone outputs. Those also can be switched to line outputs in terms of the impedance and the level. Coming back to the stereo outputs, those are very low impedance as well, so that for those who are freaking out with high quality headphones and so on, they are connectable on there as well. That gives us altogether basically 4 inputs and 8 outputs on this device. Okay, as a sound device, as an in and output box. You have other connectors that are here, going to come to them. You have a GPI in and output. So this is very interesting, as it is a monitoring device as well. You could put a pedal switch, for example, for talkback, so that you could put a red light for those who want to old style have a red light when you press record. Whatever, you have a whole circuitry, you can choose whatever you want to do, but you have a GPI, 1-point GPI in and output in there. Or you can also place, there's a little adapter from jack to MIDI, and you can place a MIDI device if you want to connect a keyboard or something like that. Then it doesn't do anything with the MIDI, it just makes it go through to the next connector, which is the network connector. And the network connector, that helps me to connect it to a workstation, for example, to a computer, or to another device. Okay. So let's see it very basic at the beginning. I have one computer and one Anubis. So because I just need to do some recording and some listening. So there you would say, yeah, of course, that doesn't bring me any advantage to be USB or Thunderbolt, indeed, but you just connect over the network and that's it. And one thing, nevertheless, to keep in mind is that a network cable, 1 gigabit Ethernet, provides you roughly 410 audio channels bidirectional in 1FS, so 44.1 and 48K. If you go 2FS, 96, you have it in 2 and so on. So you have a tremendous potential on that cable. Obviously, this device is not able to handle 410 audio channels, but it's able to handle 256. So you have a grid of 256 in and output in there over the network. Okay. So obviously, you're not going to need all of it at the same time, but we're just before 5 minutes ago talking about monitoring in 22.2, for example. That suddenly makes a lot of channels to manage. So you sometimes need this potential. Another little thing is that next to it you have your DC input for the power supply. One interesting and I think important thing to notice is that the power supply can be given also over Ethernet. So if you have a power over Ethernet switch, it means that this device can be powered without the DC input. But the DC input can nevertheless be connected then as well, and it will make a redundancy for those who need this as a crucial device for redundancy. And you have a Kensington lock, as it is a small device. It fits in. That's more for broadcasters, radio stations, or people like this, so they can connect it here and nobody goes away at home with it. A few mechanical aspects to understand with this device. This is a mold aluminium box. So when you switch it on, you can feel it later. It's always a bit warm because it cools down because of the aluminium. Okay, but you have 2 open places here where obviously the air circulates, and you have a fan in there. The fan is not supposed to be switched on. It will switch on automatically when this device becomes higher. I think it's 52 degrees Celsius. So it happened to me last year actually. It was in Portugal, but like in a sunny day like here in Rome, where I didn't think of. I was in the session and I had this device in the sun. So after 2 hours, it started, okay, it's too hot. So obviously this is not a studio situation, it's not a quiet situation, but it has a security in case it becomes too hot and it can cool down by itself. One thing that is important to understand and nice to have, you have here below a microphone stand. So it means that ergonomically, you could put it somewhere next to you, or you can just fabricate an arm coming out so you can move it over your desk wherever you want. But also if you elevate it, there is more circulation of the air, so it cools down as well on that aspect. And then finally, for the operational side, you obviously have a touch screen that is here, where you can obviously, we're going to see all of that, what you can do on there, but you have 5 soft buttons here and 2 there. One I think that is crucially important for many people is that you have a speaker mute. As you are working with digital, audio workstation and things and whatever, and that they should run smoothly most of the time, but sometimes it happens that it doesn't work, it hangs, it crashes, whatever. You always have mechanically the possibility, because this is the access to your speakers, if they're connected here over the network, but you can mute them. And so you can be sure that it's not going to affect your speakers, because there's going to be a big noise in your speakers to prevent your ears, obviously, but also to preserve the speakers. And then you have one button, which is the talkback, so on-off talkback. You have here in between those 2 buttons, you have a little hole where there's a little implemented microphone in there. So it means that you can use this as a talkback. Of course, it's not the best microphone. You can imagine that it's tiny, but at least you can communicate. So it means that if you go to have a mobile recording to an artist or a speaker or a comedian to do some voiceover or whatever it is, and you go into a room and you can sit back and at least you can communicate with the person over the microphone that is in. And then you have those 5 buttons where you have the menu button and 2 speaker buttons and 2 headphone buttons. Obviously, if you have 3 speaker sets, you can use this one as a speaker set. I can inside determine what button does what. Okay, it's just a symbol on it, but you can change the affectation of this button the way you want. And you have the rotary for volume, obviously, for different things, for the mic gain, and so on, that you can change all of that. If you want to, I can pass it later if you want to have a look at it, or you can come over here. Good.
And with a software, you can change the functionality of the button?
Yes. You can inside. People will say, I give you 2 examples. People will say, well, actually, we only have 1 headphone, and I want to deactivate this one, so there's no confusion. You deactivate it. Or some other people say, well, I would like to have 3 speaker sets. So you can make 1, 2, 3, for example, and you only have 1 headphone. Then you have virtual speaker sets that are on the display here, but they're only accessible in some pages, not all pages. So this is why you have those 4 buttons that are accessible all the time. Okay, but yes, you can manage this software-based the way you want. So I think everybody sees the screens, huh? That's fine for you? Good. So basically we have 4 of those Anubis models in terms of hardware. You have the standard Anubis like you have here with an EtherCon connector, one network connector, and you have the SPS, which has 2 connectors. This is, this is 1 connector as well. Those 2 connectors don't have an EtherCon connector, but another standard connector, 2 of them. This is for people who there are 2 applications. Either it's for people who do broadcast because you do redundancy. So the people in the broadcast area, what they do is that all their audio connection is always two connectors, 2 cables, so that in case one fails, you have the other one that works. Which is a very interesting concept, and I think it's going to get more into other industries and applications as well. But the broadcast is quite advanced with all its networking infrastructure and so on, so that in the other industry it will take time. But let's say for the live events and all the recording events, the high quality recording events, having redundancy makes total sense in case of a failure of a system, so that you can use the other one. So this is the difference, but what is interesting, you can also, instead of having this working as a redundancy, you can ask it to work as a switch. So it means you can connect two devices on there. You could have a computer and another Anubis or a converter like this, so that you don't need to have an extra switch with you, typically for mobile application. So you have just a Happy or Horus with an Anubis and a computer, and you don't need the switch with you. And that makes it very convenient. One thing to say, in the switch mode, you only can connect two hardware devices, not more, because the switch is not able to handle it, otherwise it's going to become overloaded. And then we have two families, each time with those devices. We have the normal family that stops at 192K in terms of its sample rate, and we have what we call the premium family that goes above to do DSD and DXD, so it means 8FS sample rate and DSD 256, so 11.2 megahertz in 1 bit sample rate. Is any of you working or listening to DSD material? Okay. Is it something you know nothing about it? Never heard? Yes?
Yeah.
So for those who don't know, perhaps just to give a little idea, is that, to give the history first of all, is that in the 90s, late 90s, Philips and Sony, who owned the classic CD licenses, technical licenses, was running out, and they were looking for new formats to convince the people, again, to buy their new records in new formats. Like it was in the olden days, and they invented a format called SACD. That stands for Super Audio CD. But of course, that is the purchase final format. But that never. I mean, it worked, but it never really worked. But the production side of it, they wanted, of course, also to go in higher quality, and they decided that there was 96 kilohertz, there was 192 kilohertz, and they were asking themselves, okay, but let's do something a bit more even. So they started to think about, again, what they already experienced before, is to have a signal without a resolution. A signal that is in 1 bit, but in much higher sample rate frequency. So they invented the DSD, which stands for Direct Stream Digital, which is a 1 bit signal, so you cannot modify it, and it was in those days 64 times 1FS. So it brings something like 2.8 megahertz sample rate. And even though the public format never really worked, at least in Italy or in Europe, it worked in Japan and the US, but not really here, the SACD. But the format for recording was something that people found interesting, because it brings another acoustic, it brings something closer to analog, and so on and so on. But there were of course big problematics also, because the machines, the computers, the workstations, all of that were not as powerful as what we have today. So it was quite expensive, it was complicated, it was a bit fragile also, the computers, because they had to be big and so on. So it was all a bit on the edge in terms of technology, but it worked. And then in the mid-2000s, I mean 2007, 8, whatever, it all started to become down, because MP3 was suddenly, it's exactly the opposite, but it was suddenly so popular, and it was obvious that the people will consume music either with files that they download or with streaming. And in those days, internet, if you remember, at home, you had a connection perhaps of 100 download 100 megabyte or 300 megabyte, but that was it. So streaming a DSD file or downloading a DSD file was impossible. And so it was all going a bit down and disappeared and whatever. And by 2013, 14, when people started to have fiber at home, people started to have big download possibilities. The few who were still existing were suddenly reviving the DSD and went further. DSD 128 and DSD 256 and so on. So today, the classic recording in DSD is in 256 times 1FS. That brings a sample rate of 1.2 megahertz. I'm not going into details now, but there's a much better sound because of the filters in the high frequencies and so on. But what is interesting, the concept, is that you don't cut your signal at 20K. You go much higher in the resonance of the frequencies, so that you, if you have a piano, if you have an instrument or a voice, obviously, you have frequencies that are demultiplied in the higher spectrum. Your ear is not hearing it, but your brain gets them emotionally, so to say, so that you have a full spectrum of the music. And this is where people like, I'm not talking only about DSD, but also the higher sample rates, because it brings all of these aspects and concepts to it. So suddenly, many recordings have been done again in DSD. Many labels, independent labels, have produced in DSD. And what is interesting today in the music business is that you have a real business model where, sorry, I just see my battery is running low. So obviously, if I would put the plug into the power, it will work much better. What is interesting is that there's a real business model today with the DSD where many independent labels, mainly in contemporary music, classic music, a bit of jazz, a bit of world, they know very well that their customers, they will download the highest quality file. And of course that will be more expensive than the 1FS WAV file or the FLAC file or the MP3 file. So they make a good living, is perhaps exaggerated, but they make a living out of it again, where they can reinvest into the artists and make something with it. So it is something interesting to look at, and those devices indeed can do 2 DSD inputs, for example, for microphones, so that you can record straight away in DSD into a workstation that allows, of course, support DSD. This is why we have the premium family and the standard family. Yeah, that's it about that. Good.
I have a question
Yes.
about the API MK2 and Anubis SPS.
Mhm.
When I'm making change my Anubis like switch mode, may I connect one happy and Horus in changing?
It's too much.
Too much.
That makes 3 hardware devices. We are clearly saying that we guarantee 2 hardware devices
Over
over the switch that is inside. Now, it's all about size. So if you say a Horus potentially can have 48 in and out plus 128 plus 24 CPU. So it makes a lot of channels, and this poor switch will not able to handle this, plus the happy.
Oh.
This is where, when you have more than 2 devices, a switch becomes, a switch.
Two devices included.
Yes. When I say 2 devices, it would be Anubis plus happy or Anubis plus Horus, for example.
Okay.
But Anubis plus happy plus Horus plus computer, that makes a lot suddenly. Because I'm not saying it doesn't work. It could work. It depends how many channels.
But imagine guaranteed 2.
Merging guarantees 2 hardware devices. Yes.
Ask to correct me my poor English.
No, it's
Because
good.
it's a little bit crap.
Your English is very well.
No.
It's very good.
Because you are gentle.
So, this is in terms of the hardware, size of it, and what it can do. And now we're going to go to the music mission. So, to be clear to understand is that obviously on those devices you have a firmware that you install that gets updated because there are some bug fixes, some releases, some new improvements, some features, whatever. And we launched this 2 years ago with a monitoring mission. So it's a monitoring application that we're going to see afterwards. And now we launched it like 2 months ago in May, something like that, with a music mission. So it means that you can now toggle from one mission to the other. When you switch it on, or it boots up always in the mission you desire, but you go into preference and you can see I can switch to another mission. Okay? And you can imagine, perhaps in the future, there will be more than 2 missions, more applications. So some people will say, no, I only need this mission and the rest I don't care. But some other people will have the ability to move from one to the other. So here I'm going to try to explain a little bit what the music mission is doing, and later I will try to explain what the monitoring mission is doing. So the music mission is basically a mixer. And this mixer, you can compare it like an old style, not in terms of the quality or whatever, but the flexibility and the application, like a mixer that everybody had somewhere, a Yamaha or whatever it is, or a Mackie mixer, in a corner, because you could do some live mixing, you can do some just recording and then going into a workstation and things like that. But also, it's a real-time mixer without any latency. You have a few effects, and you can have some cues, some headphone outputs, because you have musicians, and you want them to provide a different mix for the singer, or for the guitarist, or for the percussionist, or the drummer, or whatever, who want obviously to have different mixes than their colleagues and so on. So this is the concept of the music mission, okay? But what is nice, because it's IP based, you can then extend the size of the mixer, okay? So obviously, we were talking about 4 inputs and 8 outputs. This is what this guy is providing. But as it is network based, you can then add different in and outputs that are over the network and extend your console with that. What is interesting to observe is that you also have a lot of cues, a lot of sends. You have included plugins in there. We're going to see all of that bit by bit. So the idea is that obviously you have the mixer. What can you do with the mixer? Or how can you configure it? Then to go to the outputs, and then finally go to the plugins. And we have some technical aspects at the end about peering and so on. I'm going to talk about this when we'll come to that. So let's start first with the mixer layout. So the mixer layout on the left is the classic mixer layout with some faders, where you can bring them up and down. I mean, I have an emulator here behind, but you can, this is the emulator. So you can bring it, you don't see it here. Sorry, this I have to do differently. I'm gonna do it like this, and up. And which one was it? Like this. And now you should be able to see it, yes. So this is an emulator. This guy here. This is an emulator of a virtual Anubis, so that you can see what's happening, okay? So here you obviously have faders of your inputs, of your outputs, of your inputs. They either be microphone inputs, so here the first two ones are the microphone inputs of the device of the Anubis. The next one is the line input, the 2 line inputs of the device. And then you have the DAW, the auxiliaries, or whatever is coming in that you decide to feed into the Anubis inside. And then you have another view, and you see I changed it here by touching this button, and now these are rotaries, so that I can send, for example, to auxiliaries.
It's
yes.
touch, no?
No, so you see I represent here this screen. This is the touch screen, and I press there. This is a soft knob. So this is not touch. This is always there. This is always a knob. But then on the screen itself, yes, it is a touch screen. And then I can see, for example, what I want to send into my reverb, into my dynamic bus, into my stands, or into my stand 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on from this track. And here, indeed, I could go touching this one and go up and down, or use the rotary over here. Okay, good. So you have those 2 different types of sets, and you can very easily already make your mixes that you want to be done depending of who and what you want to do. And here on the right side, you see that you have some different knobs on there, so that you have mix, dim, mono, solo, clear, and menu. And that means obviously that if you go onto mix page, you will go then straight away to the cues, but to see the entire cues. You can straight away go to the auxiliaries to go see the entire auxiliaries and so on. Dim is obviously the monitoring dim. The mono is the down mix of what you hear. And then the solo clear, obviously you can solo different types of strips, so that you can obviously monitor them and solo clear them as well. Then going straight away into the channel itself, you see that you have little colors here, okay? And if I press here on one of these channels, for example, it will open this window, where then I can move to the preamp, or I can move to the EQ, I can move to a dynamic. And if I add a EQ instance, for example, it will put this little light on. So I always know if there's an EQ, if there's a dynamic, to give you an idea, I have 21 EQs with 4 bands available in one Anubis, and I have 64 dynamics available in one Anubis. This is a little bit, and one reverb. This is a little bit the size of what you can have. And then you have, obviously, the solo there, you have the view meter, and on the top, you have the panner. And you can press on the panner, and it will open you this window, where then you can go straight to the left, straight to the right, or just say left, right, or in the middle to go straight on one or the other. And this is then the rotary channel we've seen, where you can then see how it goes. And if you click there at the bottom, you will then see the fine, if you want, mic input here, and there you have a mute and you have a 0 dB on the infinite straight away into the channel at that stage. If you press to the preamp, you remember that before pressing down to the channel you go to preamp. So now you open the preamp, and here in the preamp I have my input 1 and 2, for example. I can now select the gain with the rotary. I change the gain. I can go into pad, or I can increase the pad into a higher input, into the boost input. And of course I have mic line at 48 volt and low pass as an input as well. If I want to go to the input 3 and 4, I just swipe it through and it will go to my inputs 3 and 4. Okay? And you will see in a minute when we will add more inputs, you will have simply more inputs here, and you can swipe through so that you have your input 1 and 2 from the happy, for example, that you can manage from there. This looks like a little bit, in terms of a diagram, to an old style console. What do we have in terms of the signal flow? So if we take it from the very top, obviously we have the gain, then we have the EQ, then we have the dynamic. I'm going to show the plugins in a while. Then we have the reverb, the send, and then you have all the Q sends for the headphones. You have the bus mixes and the final fader with the solo, the mute, and so on at the bottom. So it is obviously not long like this. Physically it is impossible, but you have everything in here done logically like a standard console, as you would expect. Pressing now on the mixer page, this is where you can see the different cues, where you can access the different mixes. What is also interesting is that if you press, for example, for a few seconds mix, not just once, but like you hold for 3 seconds, it will propose you that you can apply the same mix that is, for example, in Q2 to Q3, so that you copy and paste the mix, and then you change it and you adapt it for the guitarist to the singer or whatever it is. And so you have facilities and easy way to move from one to the other on that aspect. You obviously, this is a nice feature. Seems very basic, but I think it's nice. You can then also add colors and names to your different bus structure, so that you understand how you move from one place to the other. This is exactly what I was saying about the importing the mix. So you press a long time, it opens this window, and what mix do you want to apply to that one? And it's just a copy and paste basically on that aspect. It is very important to understand that the monitoring side in Anubis Music Mission is limited to stereo. Okay, so that you can have stereo plus 1, I mean 2.1 if you have a sub LFE or a subwoofer with some bass management, but you don't do 5.1, you don't do 7.1, you don't do 22.2 and all of that. For that you move to the monitoring mission. Okay, but it's the same device. We think that when you are doing pure recording, you are more or less working with headphones or just with speakers, and you concentrate on the recording. So there's no reason to start to monitor some things on that aspect. But you have different alternative outputs. Okay, you have a main mix, but you can have an alternative mix, either that you don't want to destroy with a solo, for example, so that you don't have an AFL but a PFL and things like that. or simply because you want to send something differently to another room or to another place, to be able to listen to those different things. And then you choose what outputs you want to use, of course, if you want to use the local output or if you want to use a happy output, for example, for the alternative.
Il crossfeed è
monitoring.
automatico, lo fa? Crossfeed?
The crossfit is automatic.
No.
No?
You go check it in here. Let me see if I can reach it from there. Settings. Here's the crossfeed you select in percentage how much you want. And you can go up and down. And you can select here also the crossover that is in that case at 80 Hertz. Then the thing, obviously, if we look at the performance and you can connect all of those type of instruments, I mean all of these different types of instruments, you understood it very well, but I can go up to 5 Qs with no latency so that all these people could listen to the same, not to the same, to different outputs but from the same material without any latency, depending of what you want to use and to send. One interesting aspect, here it's written expert mode. We have 2 modes in Anubis. We have thought that for people who never worked with it, they can start with that's how it comes delivered in the simple mode, and you will only have 1 cue, because you would only have 1 artist. But the moment then you want to expand, you just activate your expert mode, and you have many more possibilities. You have more buses, you have more cues. It just the system becomes bigger in that aspect. So more things to manage. And you have the monitor controls, as I explained, the mono, the solo, and the dim possibility, so that you can quickly go from one to the other. What is also important in the monitoring mixer, you see, we talked here with those faders at the beginning, and if you push them a little bit more to the right, you will start to see here all your sends. And your sends typically have the possibility to send it to the monitoring, so that you can straight away hear what your cue is sent. You can then also talk to the cue and only to that cue. So either you press talk and it's talk to all. If you press this talk here, this one, it's talk to all. So I talk to everybody at the same time. But then if I go into this window, I can select which one I want to talk to, so that I can only talk to one musician, and that not everyone hears because the singer was just singing badly or whatever it is. You know, it's always the same story. Discretion. And these are then the plugins. So the plugins come with it, built in it. They are very interesting because first of all they sound good, they're very flexible. So you have 4-band EQs. And those 4-band EQs, of course, the bands can be shelved, or they can be also as low pass or high pass and things like that. The dynamic can be either dynamic. I mean, it's a dynamic with a gate, with a compressor and a limiter. And you don't need to use everything at the same time. You can choose below here what you want to use in that compressor, and in that dynamic, if you want to compress, to limit, or and to gate, and you can switch it on, obviously. And they are working, all those plugins are working obviously in mono and in stereo. So you can pair basically a strip or a double mono strip into a stereo strip, and then apply the same plugin to this stereo strip. And you have one reverb. For this, we created a specific reverb bus that is already there, and you just send the things you want to send into this reverb bus. You have obviously different choices. You have presets that you can choose from the classic, the plates, and the long and the short, and so on. And you can send it into this bus and then recuperate the bus and mix it down to your main output. One thing we found very important as well is to implement some snapshots and presets. So, because this device can be used, for example, as we said, for live events, but it can be also to do an album, to record an album with musicians at the same time around playing live. So we decided that having 18 presets is enough. Generally, you never go over 18 songs. but so that you can recall your songs straight away. And those songs will be obviously all the mixer setup, but all the cues set up as well. The presets of the EQs, of the reverb, of the dynamics, everything is included in those presets. And this is why we call them snapshots, because they're instantly available. Okay, so we come back to this Yamaha desk that we're talking about at the very beginning, but it's the same idea as having those presets on one of those analog or digital desks, is you just go straight back to whatever preset or song you want. There again, you can name them, you can color them if you want. And on the left side, obviously, you have, no, sorry, that was on the left side. On the right side, you also have 18 presets for plugins, for EQs, for dynamics, and for reverb that you can recall independently of the snapshots of the mixer presets. Yes?
For the EQ, is the phase of the EQ is constant or?
Yeah, phase linear. It's basically, for those who know or who use Pyramix, it is the same algorithm as the EQX in Pyramix. So it's a phase linear EQ, and it's, I mean, for what you need for recording, it's fair enough. I mean, you wouldn't need more bands if you want to do room correction or if you want to do mastering or whatever, but typically in a music mission application, you don't need more. So you understood obviously that if I open the emulator, which is here, and go back to there, so this is, I'm just repeating it, this is basically an emulator of what you have on the touch screen over here. So you see that I have the panner as I explained before, so that you can pan the way you want. You have down here, if you click down here, you can go to the preamp, you can go to the EQ, you change your EQ. Here I have to do it with the middle mouse button, like this. Oh, sorry. You have to go to the middle mouse button, but you would change it with the wheel. Okay, so this is the frequency, this is the gain, and there again you can snapshot it, for example, and you store it in here, and you call it I don't know, best. There we go. You store it, so it's here now, and you can record it from where you want. So now you go on to the number 3, and you go onto EQ, and you go onto snapshot, and you record it.
The EQ is only parametric.
Yes. Yes. It is only parametric. We didn't see any need to do anything else, but
Was just a question.
yeah. But it is only parametric for now, at least. So you do all your little things you need here, and then when you go to the cues, for example, you can see this is my, if I go back to my Q1, so this is my Q1 now that is completely different, and that is sent, and of course I can make a different setting to my Q1, and I go back to my main mixer, where I have a different mix. And I send all those types differently the way I want it to that. Okay? Obviously you understand that there are loads of flexibilities in there. Good. Now there is something that has been introduced in the Anubis music mission that I find very interesting and important. So until now, basically, I just connect this to my computer. So I have 4 analog inputs, 8 outputs, that's it. Now, if I need more, what do I do and how do I process? We have, obviously, at merging, we have other converters that are called happy and Horus. So later in another presentation, I'm going to explain everything about the happy and the Horus. So I'm not going into detail now, but basically in terms of analog in and output, this guy can have up to 16 analog in and output, and this guy can have up to 48 in analog in and outputs. So we've invented one modus that is called peering. And the peering allows me suddenly to connect not only my Anubis to my computer, but to connect it also to another device that is on the network. And we thought that one typical thing is that when you are in your studio environment, obviously you have a workstation, so you have a computer. But when you are in a rehearsal environment, before recording, for example, or let's say the next day they record and so on, you not necessarily have a computer and you don't want necessarily to use a computer. So what we decided with the peering modus is that you can do that without using a computer. So here it's a little bit obnoxious because I need a computer to show you the screen and so on, but I'm happily showing it on the Anubis afterwards if you want to. But the idea is that you have one functionality that is called peering, and that without the computer, I will see here on that screen what is available on the network. And it will tell me here, oh, you have a happy on the network. Okay, so what do you want from the happy? I have input cards, I have output cards, and I have digital input cards and digital output cards. And you say, okay, I want these inputs and those outputs. And then it always works per 8. Let's say I have 8 analog inputs. I want them all the 8, I go straight away. But perhaps I only want 2 of them, so I can also make this choice. But let's say I want all the 8, and suddenly your mixer gets enlarged in Anubis, and you add all the 8 inputs on the top of it. Okay? So you have this possibility very easily. Let me show you. If I go now to my browser. So this is now the Anubis. This is now the Anubis. This is the web browser of the Anubis we have here. So obviously, if I move the fader, I go up and down here. And now I'm going to go into peering. Unfortunately, you won't see that here on the screen, but I'm just going to show you how it expands. Now I add my analog input, my 8 more analog inputs, and you see it's updating it automatically. And now I have my happy 1 to 8 over there, and just it resizes the mixer from what I need. Okay, so it is there. I didn't need the computer. Again, I just showed it to you so that you can see it. And if I clear the peering, which I do now, it resizes the mixer to something smaller again. So you can do that typically in an environment where you can not necessarily need a computer, or you do not need necessarily a computer, and you can manage your in and your output that are straight away available. And this, of course, is the same when I do it again. Let me do it here. Peering, happy, 1 to 8, 1 to 8. There we go. And now if I go into the preamps, same thing. I have the 5 inputs. Why 5? Because number 5 is my talkback microphone. Basically 4 inputs of my Anubis, and now I have those 8 inputs of my happy. And there's one nice thing also is that this is perhaps for those who don't know, this is a web browser, so it's a remote control to my Anubis. You have also this remote control to Happy and Horus, but it's a remote control to my Anubis, but which is agnostic of workstation, a Mac PC or whatever it is, as it is now a Chrome web browser. Or Safari or whatever. So you can also use it with all kinds of systems without having to worry, is there any compatibility and so on. And the very nice thing is that I would have to go in here though to be able to work with that audio inputs. How can I do that? Well, I can do that later, but the idea in here is that you can also control it from 2 different places. So you have the same signal, but you can control it, for example, for the mixer, who has his own or her own gain input, and for the in-ear monitoring, another type of control, because they want a different gain in that. So you can have really 2 different types, or typically also an application is that broadcasters who will record a concert, there is the concert hall, that they have their own gain, and then the broadcaster wants to have a different gain. At least the ability to tweak it differently. So you have 2 possibilities of controlling the mic pre's as well in there. So obviously you size the Anubis the way you want. One thing is important to understand is that you obviously have this device. And I said at the beginning, at Merging we developed a whole chip and so on that works in all our devices that is called Z-Man. And the Z-Man has basically a grid of 256 by 256. Okay, that's what's in there. But obviously this device, because of the monitoring or the music mission or whatever it is, needs some resources depending on how you want to I/O all of that. So what you have to understand is that in the monitoring mission, we will come later, but you have 128 inputs and 32 outputs. Okay, this is the grid, how it works, and obviously that moves down or differently when you go higher in sample rate. In the music mission, we decided that you have 48 inputs and 24 outputs all the time. Okay, at the same time, managing more than 48 inputs on a device like this starts to become quite big. So 48 inputs and 24 outputs up to 192 kilohertz, and above, then in 8FS you have 24 inputs and you have 24 outputs, and the music mission doesn't support DSD. So this is the framework in the way it works. To understand with, I mean, this is for people who want to work in higher sample rates and want to understand how this works. There's not everything absolutely possible on that aspect. The peering, there's a graphic. That's what I didn't show before. The peering, when you tap peering, this is how it shows up. So you have a happy or a horse showing up, or both. And then you select what you want from those cards to have available, and you import it. The preamps that I was explaining, and the remote control. So the remote control, this is now a bigger mixer already. You can also say that you want to see directly all the sends on the remote control, and basically you have a mixer. I mean, everybody would know how to work with it and how to manage it from the remote control. One thing that has been implemented as well, and I think this is important to understand, and I'm going to do it live here, is something called Unite. So let me just go, I go to this black screen here so that I can show it. And I'm going to disconnect it. Okay. So the first time you will connect your Anubis, for those who don't know much about this. Obviously, there's a difference, is that here I have a network. If I have a USB device, my computer will recognize the USB device. If I have a Thunderbolt device, my computer will recognize the Thunderbolt device, because on the, in the OS, there are some drivers that it makes it recognizable and blah, 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 blah. Here, this doesn't exist. So obviously, I have to install a driver first to be able to be recognized. And then we have two modes. We have one that is called Unite, and one that is called basically Ravenna AS67, which is more advanced type of modus. And then there are other moduses. I'm not going to go into detail. This exists for PC, like I'm showing here, and for Mac in both ways. Now the Unite thing is in the idea that, okay, I connect now my hardware device to my computer, and I want to have all IOs of this device straight away available in my workstation without any hassle, like I would have with the USB section. So here, this is how it happens. I download our driver, I install it on this computer, and suddenly it sees here, this is my computer, and it sees I have two hardware devices. Which one do you want to connect? Well, I want to connect the Anubis. So I click the Anubis, and there, before connecting it to me, it tells me, okay, this device has physical inputs, has microphones, has bus returns, and has peered inputs. Do you want to connect everything like this that I have on the workstation? You can say yes and no. You can pick and choose whatever you want. And when you say that, you say okay. And it connects it together. And now it is peered. So it means that this guy now is shaking hands with my computer. It is all safe, and it's all nice and steady. And now I can move to my workstation and just have a playback like this, and I should be able to have it on the output of my Anubis that you don't see. But this is the straightforward. Where is it? This is the straightforward way to connect my devices without any hassle, straight point to point. Then, of course, I have the advanced modus, as I was explaining before, which is this Ravenna AS67 that I'm going to show later, where then you have a bus structure, a tool to be able to connect like a patch, basically a virtual patch, where you can connect the in and the outputs and do your own type of setup, but that will then increase the complexity of the but of course increase the possibilities as well. But so we try as much as possible also to help you to go step by step into the network world and before, how can I say, throwing all the complexity over to your mind on that. Okay, I think oops, no, this was it. Yes, and then the next one. Yeah, obviously Mac is compatible as well, and even the latest chips, the M1 is also already supported by us. Not recently, but it works already greatly with us. Any questions, remarks?
When you use the peer, you can manage a live section in this case.
Totally. That's what they will do at Umbria.
In Umbria, it will be one of the stage, one of the concert constantly will be mixed live directly only with one Anubis and paired with a happy and in and out and mixed directly with the Anubis screen. Is a small jazz section and so it's limited on 16 channels, but will work for all the festival like that. Plus one other stage, but it's a little more complex. But basically, will be the one of the, I think, the first in the world that will use Anubis music mission mix live directly, virtual mix in live situation, and with pairing and everything, so no computer in it. The computer will be need only for the backup recording, for the future use, because you can use that without, you will mix live and a computer can be connected no matter what happens in the live situation and just record straight on all the channels to be used for the future.
So there was not mixing console in the venue and also on stage.
No, only directly, only the small Anubis, maybe just a touch screen or an iPad, but this is under check. But basically it will be only the Anubis or a big iPad with more
Basically
space.
to have this, you would need somehow a computer, but you don't use it to manage.
Yeah.
So this is what is the beauty, is that also for rehearsal and so on, is that you don't need to switch on your computer to control all that. You just connect everything what you want for the live or the rehearsal session. You can of course then correct things over the computer if you want to, but you don't need to struggle with anything.
The computer is used because I lost it also as a backup, just in case something doesn't work.
No, the computer is used only for recording. That will get from the network, will get all the input channels and record it. That's it.
What about the output session? You say you have a 2 plus 1 channel, but if you are in-ear monitor for the musician,
I have the cues.
With the cues, okay.
I have the cues. I have 5 cues. That is fair enough. That is, yeah, one could ask, oh, I need many more. But for the moment, we designed it for 5, and we think that's a good number. And you have an alternative mix as well if you want. I mean, an alternative mix output. So you have basically 2 mix outputs in stereo or 2.1 plus 5 cues.
Okay. You said before, but I made a little bit confusion for this.
Just to be clear. And those outputs, like the inputs, can be paired to outputs to a happy, for example, and so that you can go then onto headphone distribution or whatever it is. outputs.
This is very important.
Yeah, of course. And again, low latency, so there's no latency. It's DSP mixing in the device. So, and the EQs and all of that, so you don't lose anything.
This is quite news about merging technology used at DSP, because in the early, when merging the project build the pyramids and the Horus and Happy in this philosophy, you don't have DSP like Pro Tools, HD or something like that with a very amount of DSP, but you use the power of the CPU of your computer. But now inside the merging EPI MK2
Yeah.
and Anubis, there is a DSP.
Actually, it's funny because we actually did work with DSP in the past, but we moved it from the computer to the hardware device. I mean, in the late 90s with Pyramix, you needed a card that is called that was called Mikerinos, and that lasted for roughly 15 years. That card, and that had a trimedia chip of Philips, 64 by 64, and so we were doing DSP technology. To run Pyramix, you needed this card in there, and it was like you said with HD and others. We were putting cards in our computers as well. But since 2007 or something like that, we decided to remove bit by bit this DSP because there's more power on the CPU.
Yeah.
But the problem with the CPUs is like those things are running on operating system that are not real time. And when you do audio, you want real time. So we invented something called Mascore, which is basically for our Pyramix, which is basically hiding the cores to the computer, to the OS. And we use it in real time to process our mixing and all of that.
Great idea.
And this is DSP. That's nothing else than DSP. We just use basically Intel cores to do DSP calculation.
But about 100 times lower of price, because a new computer, new CPU, costs about a better CPU to 2,000 euro, and a box with a 10 DSP is much more.
Yeah, of course. Oh, no, clearly, it makes a big change, yes. But now we think that typically today, I mean, what I'm having here, I have a DAW that is native, so that has latency, but I can provide a mix to the artist in their ears or to the comedian or actor or whatever it is, or actress, without any latency, while I have latency on my device. And this makes it very convenient because I move the DSP from here to there. Questions, other questions, remarks?
Not yet.
Not yet.
I have one, but maybe stupid. Could I change the place, the position of the EQs and compressor and
No.
in the channel?
No. For the moment, not. But you can obviously bypass them.
No.
But no, you cannot change the. We made it in a logical way, yeah. The EQ first, so.
Yeah.
But you can create a dynamic bus, so you have this. Typically for a drum section, you can create a dynamic bus so that you can reinstate it afterwards into a strip. There you can then post EQ the dynamic that aspect. So you can do it that way.
But the question is very interesting.
Yeah.
Because I have entitled to H8000 that you can mix infinitely way. I make in my chain first dynamic, after delay, and after or mix.
The way you want, yes.
For me, it's a very good idea to perform another upgrade?
There can be there are many new ideas, and there can be many new things. And typically, one thing that is interesting with people like at Umbria Jazz is that they gave us already many. Well, this is then a very live application, but they gave us already many input because they use it now since I would say 3-4 weeks or so, where they gave us already many input, and we know that we have something that is already very good,
Oh yes.
and it can be yes. Become a bit better with some input and so on. And yes, we have this input from others as well already. Then we have to see technology, what is possible, what is not possible, and so on. But yes, indeed.
After
It's
a new
just
idea.
just a starting point that will be developed
Yes,
in many ways.
exactly. Also, we are obviously thinking of other effects. Today we have reverb, EQ, and dynamic. But obviously having a delay, having a de-esser, and things like that could be nice as well. So
It's that, but what is nice is that the concept about mission and software based can be developed in the future without changing the hardware you already have. So that's a very good point for.
indeed, I mean, you have one hardware, and today you have two applications with it, and you can move from one to the other without any issue.
It is a very big application.
Yeah, we think so. Okay, no
Okay.
questions? Was it clear for you, my English? Was it?